Today we are counting down the 10 most valuable and historically important Marvel Comics of the year 1983. Number 10, Amazing Spider-Man 245. This is the fourth appearance of Hobgoblin, Spider-Man's biggest new villain of the early 80s. John Romita Jr. and Dave Simmons cover and art. There is a 9.9 CGC copy on the Census. Print run 241,000 copies. This book is also the 187th most valuable Marvel comic of the entire decade of the 1980s. CGC Census has graded only 532 copies, with 344 of them grading 9.6 or better. Heritage has only sold 26 copies in the last 20 years. You can see there's three different covers. The direct edition featured Spider-Man in the bottom corner. The newsstand edition featured a barcode, and the Canadian edition also has a barcode but has a higher cover price, 75 cents instead of 60 in the United States. Using the Overstreet annual price guide, we can see there's been a little bit of growth in the book in all grades, nothing major. Still a very affordable book in any grade raw. And of course, if you want to see how the higher slab copies are doing, check out eBay sales and also gpanalysis.com. On the Census overall, there is the 1 9.9 and 177 9.8s. Also, the Canadian price variant has a bunch of copies graded, including 5 9.8s. Number 9 of the year is Uncanny X-Men 171. And this book was stalled for a number of years, but it's just starting to grow again. This book features a key moment in X-Men history when Rogue joins the X-Men. Walt Simonson cover and art. Print run was high for the book at this time, 336,000 copies. X-Men, truly a giant title for Marvel in the early 80s. Ranks as 186th most valuable Marvel comic of the decade. Over 1,000 copies graded by CGC, including 371 9.6s or better. Heritage, however, has only sold 12 copies in 20 years. Again, we see the three different covers here for comparison's sake. At this time, the direct edition and the newsstand were closing in on being almost equal in print run, but it is the Canadian price edition which would be much, much rarer than the other two. Again, in the Overstreet price guide, you can see just a small bump in price in all conditions from low grade to high grade. Again, on the Census, there is a 9.9, 379.8, and a few of the Canadian price variants again graded, including 8, 9.8. Number 8 of the year is a unique one. Most people don't think of collecting this one. It's proven to be quite hard for most collectors to find. Blip is considered a magazine or a journal, but it is in comic book size format. And this book has become a major key book because of a few important things that happen in this issue. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this series, it was fairly short-lived, cashing on the video game craze. This book, Blip number 1, the video games magazine, had a hefty $1 cover price. Has a photo cover of TV star Matthew Lebarteau, and it features the first comic book appearances ever of the Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong. Print run estimated at maybe 100,000 copies. Great, ranks 161 overall for the entire decade. CGC has sold very few copies, only 77 have been graded ever. 36 9.6s or better, and Heritage Auctions has only sold 1 copy ever in 20 years. However, in the Overstreet price guide, you can see that low grades have not moved at all, raw, but high grades are sneaking up there, but still very affordable book. 77 on the Census, including 15 9.8s, and there is, in fact, a Canadian price variant with 1 9.6 ranking as the highest for that book. Number 7, one of the most important books that came out in 1983, massive print run. So people didn't think this would ever be worth anything, but it's starting to climb the list. And that book is The New Mutants, number 1. Second appearance of the team ever. Chris Claremont and McLeod worked on this book. Print run estimated at 300,000 copies. It features the origin of Karma, number 7 of the year and 145 of the decade. CGC's gone crazy. Over 3,600 copies graded, including 2,400 9.6s or better. Even Heritage has now sold 91 copies. Again, 3 different covers to collect. Overstreet annual price guide, no movement at all in lower grades. slight bump in higher grades raw. On the Census, there are 2 copies graded 10 and 4 9.9s, and then another 1,400 9.8s. Even the Canadian price variants are 18 9.8s. Not a hard book at all to find, but people are starting to want this in their collection. Number 6. This doesn't happen often these days, but we have a death issue, which is actually a key issue with a high price tag. It is the death of the original Ghost Rider of the 1970s. This is the final issue of the popular 70s Ghost Rider title. And telling you a few more things about it. Print run was actually quite low on this title, which is, of course, why it would have been canceled. It has an iconic black background cover. Print run estimated at only 125,000 copies, which was quite low for an ongoing superhero title for Marvel at this time. Last issue, Bob Budiansky cover and art. Only 195 copies graded by CGC, 107 9.6s or better. Heritage has only sold 5 copies. In Overstreet, again, no movement in low grades, slight bump in high grades raw. On the Census, there are only 39 9.8s, 68 9.6s. Canadian price variants, there are 5 9.8s. So this one's a bit overlooked. So I'd hunt that one out, see if you can find some high grade copies. Number 5 on our list is very hard to find. And in fact, it is not in comic book format. It is in paperback book format. And so many people don't think to collect this one. However, it is extremely hard to find. Mighty Marvel Team Up Thrillers. A hefty $5.95 cover price at this time. That would make that about a $30 retail book brand new if it was published today. Features reprints of many classic Silver and Bronze Age books, such as Silver Surfer 4, Tales of Suspense 58, Amazing Spider-Man 16. It ranks 102 of the entire decade. CGC has only graded 4 copies at all, with 3 9.6s or better. Heritage has only sold 7. Most people not realizing this book actually has some value. It's getting old. We're approaching 40 years on these books. Again, in Overstreet, no movement at all in low grade or high grade. But on the Census, it's amazing how rare it is. People simply have not thought to get this book graded at all, which means there might not be many high grade copies out there, period. Next on our list, number 4, Amazing Spider-Man 239. And of course, this is a major key book because it is the second appearance of the Hobgoblin and the first time he actually battles Spider-Man. Action cover. Madame Web appears in this issue. Cover art by John Romita Jr. There is a 10.0 on the CGC Census. Print run at 241,000 copies. It is the number 64 most valuable Marvel comic of the 80s. Very iconic. CGC Census is going crazy. Many people getting this graded. Over 2,100 copies, including almost 1,000 9.6s or better. And Heritage has sold 91 copies. In the Overstreet price guide, book has been stalled in low grades for many years now. And in fact, in high grades, Overstreet has actually dropped the price in all higher grades. So feeling that even though this ranks as a high valuable book, it's been considered to be maybe overpriced. But don't expect that to stay that way for long. So on the Census, there is the 110, 4 9.9s, 403 9.8s. Canadian price variant, lots graded, including 8 9.8s. Number 3 of 1983 is another iconic cover that has only become a major key in the last few years. It is Star Wars number 68. Really nice cover of Boba Fett. Yellow background cover. This is the second appearance of Boba Fett and his second cover appearance ever. Art by Gene Day. Print run estimated 180,000 copies. This was still one of Marvel's biggest selling titles. And since the Star Wars movies have come back, look at CGC Census has gone crazy. It's jumped way up from 2015. Almost 1,900 copies graded, including 534, 9.6 or better. Heritage has only sold 12, though, still. In the Overstreet price guide, you can see in the last decade, the book really has been moving. It's almost tripled even in lowest grades, and in high grades, it's gone up about 6 times. This is a major key, everyone hyping on Star Wars these days. On the Census, there are 149.8s, almost 409.6s. And again, the Canadian price variant, lots of copies graded, including 9.8s. There is also a Swedish and a Finnish edition that only have 1 copy each, graded by CGC. Number 2 of the year, a major iconic book in Marvel history. And why is that? Because it is Thor 337, featuring the first appearance of Beta Ray Bill, who later became Thor. Covered by Walt Simonson and the first issue of his long-running series as writer and artist. Print run was only 147,000 copies. Thor was not selling that big at this time, making this book even harder to find. And crazy on the CGC Census, 5,700 copies graded, including 2,700, 9.6s or better. Even Heritage has sold 165 of them. Again, there's the 3 covers. Overstreet price guide is showing a lot of movement. This book is a hot book in recent years, and all grades have moved up, and even raw high grades have almost doubled in just 1 year alone. There are 2 9.9s with 1,100 9.8s, and even the Canadian price variant's gone crazy. 363 copies graded. We haven't seen that for any of the other books, including 61 9.8s. There's also a French-Canadian edition, very rare, with only 1 copy graded. And the most valuable, most iconic, historic Marvel comic of 1983 by far is Amazing Spider-Man 238. This has been a major key book for many years now, and it features the first appearance of Hobgoblin. Iconic cover. Print run was 240,000 copies. There is a 9.9 on the Census. It is the number 5 most valuable Marvel comic of the 80s. This is a major key book. Everyone wants this in their collection. And we see that on the CGC Census. In the last few years, it's really gone crazy, almost doubling. Over 6,000 copies graded, including 1,800 9.6s or better, and 183 copies sold at Heritage. It's really picking up steam. In the Overstreet price guide annual, you can see that it really has had very little movement, however, in lower grades, almost no movement at all in 15 years. But higher grades, it has doubled in high grade raw. Again, watch out for those slab CGC copies, breaking records all the time. 6,100 copies graded by CGC, 2 9.9s, and 503 9.8s. Many of the Canadian price variants, 152 of them, with 7 9.8s. There's also a French-Canadian edition, a German edition, and a different German edition published by Condor Comics. And they all only have a few copies graded on the Census. So there's the top 10 books of the year. What we're going to do now is compare them on the CGC Census. So we'll see that Amazing Spider-Man 238, by far the number 1 book of the year, also has the most copies graded in total, 6,100 copies. But Thor 337 is really catching up quickly with 5,700. The other book with lots of copies is New Mutants number 1, 3,600. Looking at which books actually have the most high-grade copies, Spider-Man 239 and New Mutants number 1 actually have copies graded 10.0. And you'll see that almost half the list even has 9.9s. So we're reaching in an era where so many people are hoarding books, bagging and boarding, and these books are being saved. So 9.9s are no longer impossible at this time frame. And looking at 9.8s, interestingly, it's New Mutants number 1 that has the most 9.8s by far, with 1,400 copies. Thor 337 has 1,100. Interestingly, though, Spider-Man 238 is a tough book to find in 9.8. While there are tons of high-grade copies, there are only 500 in 9.8, which is very low for the amount of copies that are actually graded. Which books are the rare ones on the Census? Well, of course, it's Mighty Marvel Team-Up Thrillers, which was in book format. Only a few copies graded at all. And also, Blip #1, a unique one, has very few copies graded. And Ghost Rider is very low for a mainstream book. The Death of Ghost Rider, only 195 copies. Well, there you go. The top 10 most important Marvel books of 1983. Please subscribe to this channel. We do a different year every week. Let me know your comments on this series and what you'd like to see. And we thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week.